In this video, we will show you how to replace your starter on this Kia Forte Koup. This will be located along the bottom front of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Under the hood, along the driver's side, we're going to disconnect the negative battery terminal from the battery. To do this, you'll use a 10mm wrench. Loosen the mounting nut just enough that you can remove the terminal end from the battery. A quick inspection, set it aside. Once you have that disconnected, make your way safely underneath the front of the vehicle. Underneath the front of the vehicle, we're looking along the back side of the front of the subframe. We're going to remove this plastic panel. The plastic panel is held in place with three 10mm headed mounting bolts. We'll remove each of those mounting bolts and the shield. A quick inspection of all of our mounting hardware as we continue. You want to make sure that you replace it as necessary. Hold on to that shield now. A quick inspection, set that aside. With the shield out of the way, looking in between your engine oil pan and the transmission, up along the front of the engine here, we have a clear view of our starter. Now with that shield out of the way, if you were to look in between your engine oil pan, your transmission, up along the front here, you're going to have a clear view of your starter. Let's start removing the starter. If you were to look up along the passenger side of the starter here, you're going to find the wiring harness, but it's a little bit hard to disconnect while the starter is still in place. With that said, we're not going to touch the wiring yet. Let's make our way to the mounting hardware. Now for this, you're going to find that you have two mounting bolts holding the starter to the transmission. The bolts actually come through from the other side of the transmission housing over on the driver's side and make their way through it and screw into the starter itself. You can see some of the threading right along here. So with that said, we're not going to be on this side. We'll have to move along the driver's side right along this area here. You can see one right here. The other one's a little bit harder to see. It's all the way up along the top right up there. We'll be using a 14mm to remove each of these. As you can tell, there's minimal room to be able to get a tool up in here. When doing these starters, typically I like to go with the hardest to access bolt first, which is going to be that top one right up along here. There's our bolt, a quick inspection of course. Set that aside. There's the lower bolt. At this point, we can move the starter around, but I want to be able to have a little bit more access in this area. Now what we'll do next is dislodge the wiring harness from this metal bracket so we can start removing the bracket as well. That'll give us plenty of room. To dislodge this, looking along the forward side where my index finger is, there's a couple small tabs that we'll squeeze in and pull that wiring harness out of place. There we go. Just a quick inspection of that clip. We are going to be reusing it. If it was damaged, that's okay. Typically, you can just use a wire tie if necessary for the reinstallation process. Continuing on, you're going to find that you have four 12mm headed mounting bolts, two along the top, two along the bottom of this bracket. Let's remove all four and remove that bracket from the area. I'll be using a 12mm swivel socket for these lower ones here. We've got those two lower bolts out. We'll continue on to the two upper bolts. Keep in mind these are the last things holding this bracket in place. Make sure we're holding onto that bracket for the last one. Remove your bracket. That shield out of the way, we should be able to take hold of the starter. We'll pull it towards the passenger side a little bit, and we can start bringing it down into a position that we can gain access to the wiring harness here. Now we'll start with this wire. For this, there is a locking tab. It's easiest to depress if you had a small pocket screwdriver, but you could just use your finger if necessary, squeeze it in and slide this out of place. I like the pocket screwdriver method. Just make your way right in between, easily depress that, and pull this off. Once that's off of there, just a quick inspection of that wiring harness. You want to ensure you don't see any funny colors. If you do, that's corrosion, and it would need to be dealt with. This one looks fine. Now we need to continue on to our power wire. This is the larger wire, and it's protected by this rubber boot. You want to ensure that the rubber boot is still in good reusable condition because we want to make sure this is protected during the installation process. This one looks fine. We'll continue on with the mounting nut. Now, before you start removing this mounting nut, you need to ensure that you had disconnected the negative battery terminal. If you were removing this and your tool happened to touch up against something that grounded it, it's going to create an arc and potentially cause some serious damage. Remove that, quick inspection, set it aside. While holding onto the starter, we can remove the wire from it. And now you can remove the starter from the vehicle. With the starter out of the vehicle, before we install our brand new starter, use a piece of fine sandpaper and clean the mounting point on the transmission housing where your brand new starter will sit. After a close inspection, we can install the brand new starter. Let's start getting the brand new starter in place here. We'll be bringing this up close to being in the proper position. We want to get the wiring in place. Now while I'm holding it up here, we can start with the wiring harnesses. I'm going to go with the large power wire first. We'll get that on there and snug it up. When installing this wire, of course, you do want to have it thoroughly inspected. Make sure there is no corrosion on it. Now with the brand new starter, you'll find that it came with a washer, a lock washer, and a brand new nut. For the installation process, we're going to put the flat washer first, then that locking washer, and then hold it in place with our new nut. Here's our flat washer. Try not to drop that. Locking washer. Kind of get it on there. At this point, we have both of our washers on there. It's time for that mounting nut. Once you have all of it started on there by hand, go ahead and snug it up. Make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, right there's bottomed out. Just take it a tiny bit further. We don't want to cause any damage, but we do want to go ahead and make sure that lock washer is able to do its job. With that tight, go ahead and protect the area with your rubber boot. We're just going to slide it right on over that. Press it in, and then just make sure it's secured. Now we'll continue on to our next wiring harness. For this one, we're just going to press it in. We'll listen for a click from that. Sometimes it's not very easy to hear. We'll give it a little tug, make sure it's secure. Now we can get this in place. Now it's time to reinstall our bracket in this area. We'll get this in place. Start in all 4 of your mounting bolts before tightening any of them. They're all started in, snug them up. Make sure that's tight. Make sure that's tight as well. Now it's time for our wiring harness. We're going to press these locking tabs through this area. Now with all that secure, we can start resecuring the starter to that transmission housing. We'll be doing that along the driver's side of that housing. You can move the starter around as necessary. When you're installing the starter mounting bolts, you never want to fully tighten either of them until they're both started in. You may have to keep moving it around to get them started in. This one's up here. Now that they're started in, let's go ahead and bottom them out and make sure they're nice and tight. There's that one. Let's get that final mounting bolt up along the top there. One last quick inspection in this area. Reinstall your shield. Start in all of the mounting hardware before you tighten any of it. Back under the hood, it's time to reattach our negative battery terminal. We're going to take this, press it down onto the battery as far as possible, and hold it in place with the 10mm mounting nut. Double check to make sure that's secured properly. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. At this point, you want to go ahead and hop in the passenger compartment. Start the vehicle a couple of times. Make sure the starter's functioning properly. After that, go ahead and close the hood, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.